while her skin tones are as liquid as the water itself. And the way Rembrandt has painted her hands as just an unmodelled smear almost dares the critics to make an issue of it.
You can hear them, can't you? Rembrandt van Rijn, oh yes, very talented, but my God, so difficult. Never finishes a painting. I think his best years are behind him, don't you? And what he's doing, rattling around in that big old house with his, a woman, really don't know. You have heard, she's with child, haven't you? Church deacon's quite shocked. Just a bit squalid, don't you think? That might explain why he does those rather peculiar etchings. Just who's going to buy them, I have really no idea.
Running out of favours, running out of time, late with his loan repayments on the house, the coils of Rembrandt's ruin began to rope themselves around him ever more tightly. Finally, in July 1656, Rembrandt filed for bankruptcy. This is where Rembrandt would have come, to the chamber of insolvency, passing through this door with its frieze of worthless stock certificates and rats scuttling through empty money chests of the profligate debtor. You just can't beat the Dutch for wagging their fingers at your wicked ways. Auction by auction, hammer blow by hammer blow, everything was taken. This wasn't just furniture, household stuff. It was also Rembrandt's own personal archive of art. The drawings and paintings, all the strange, fabulous stuff he'd collected, all gone. Then, the house itself.
One thing he did manage to hold on to, and that was a great mirror in the finest ebony wood frame. Titus, his son, found a bargeman who said, for a sum of money, sure, he'd carry it to their new house. So up on the bargeman's head it went, and off through the jostle of Amsterdam over cobbled streets and bridges. And at some point, the bargeman begins to sweat, his hands get slippery, his grip gets shaky. And then, as the bargeman was stepping off a bridge, witnesses who came forward to testify for the bargeman said he hadn't bumped into anyone, he hadn't fallen down. The mirror must just have broken all by itself. But there it was, on the ground, 1,000 shards and slivers, leaving Titus to carry home to his father just a frame with an empty centre.
It's 1658. Rembrandt has lost everything. So how does he paint himself? Like a king, like a god, full frontal, mantled in lustrous gold. And it's the paint, that thick, luxurious paint, which gives him his power, his magic.
No bankrupt's downcast eyes either, but a stare coming right at us little people who fancy we know something about art, a suggestion of lordly amusement playing about his eyes. His barrel chest soaks up the light, the belly swelling in front of us like a genie, the whole body pressing against the picture plane, challenging it to contain his massive authority. And if Rembrandt thinks that his way of painting has been part of the problem, he's certainly not going to abandon it now.
Just the opposite, in fact. This is a painting that bellows defiance at the apostles of crisp clarity and contour. So you think that stuff was a bit much, do you? He seems to be saying, just get a load of this.
this free and this rough, it would be downhill all the way for Rembrandt. But it wasn't. With almost everything gone, reputation, possessions, house, he still had a chance for a comeback. The comeback to end all comebacks. This, the new town hall, had just been built, and the cream of Amsterdam painters were asked to supply pictures for its interior. Against all odds, Rembrandt was one of them.
Town Hall doesn't quite describe this place, does it? It's something more than clerks and marriage licenses. Though The Hague is officially the seat of government, everyone knows Amsterdam is where the money is. So the new town hall is a shameless brag to the world about the great metropolis, built on a scale that makes the Doge's palace in Venice look skimpy.
In this solemnly beautiful setting, tone was all important. Any new paintings were going to have to be restrained, severely classical, pictorially well-behaved, which doesn't exactly spell Rembrandt, does it? In fact, anyone but Rembrandt.
So of course, at first, the job went to someone far more reliable, the painter Govert Flinck. It was only when Flinck suddenly died that someone in the council chamber dared to say the R word. No doubt greeted by silence, and then perhaps, oh why not? He's broke, he needs the work, he'll behave. When does he not deliver the goods when it really counted?
So, after getting the commission by the back door, Rembrandt set about work on the painting. The result would be, I think, the greatest triumph of his visual imagination. But it would also be his most shocking disaster. The painting was supposed to hang here, in one of the great arch spaces by the main hall. And what the burgomasters wanted was a stirring depiction of the legendary story of how the Dutch nation came to be born. It was a history that every child in the Dutch Republic would have known, as important to them as Boudicca is to us. The ancient Dutch, known as the Batavians, had their rebellion against the Romans too, and their leader was called Claudius Civilis.
The story goes like this. Claudius had been fighting on the side of the Romans against his own people. But at some point, he has a change of heart. He decides there's been one tax too many. His country bled white. So he switches sides. He summons a meeting of tribal chiefs, declares a revolt, and swears them to join him. They take the oath. The die is cast. Blood happens.
It's a stirring story, but remember who commissioned it? The establishment. Oh yes, on a rebellion, but only when it was a long time ago, and only in the most respectable way. The assumption was they'd get a respectable painting. What they got was this.
Ugliness, deformity, barbarism, a bunch of cackling louts, onion chewers, bloody-minded rebels, the paint slashed and stabbed, caked on like the makeup of warriors.
But that's what rebellion is all about, Rembrandt thought. He didn't think rebels were gentlemen. Here's the rebel leader with a wound in his face where his eye used to be. So what if the rules of art said you had to hide a blind eye behind some decorous profile? Rembrandt says, no, I'm going to stick this blind eye right in the middle of your face. That was what wild, rough and free painting did. Goes together with a sword from hell and a cup, maybe of wine, maybe of blood.
Needless to say, it seems hardly likely that the grand unveiling went down at all well. I mean, just look at it. This is a painting drunk on its own wildness. Nothing refined about this.
So down it came, deposed, disgraced, expelled. And down on his knees went Rembrandt, chopping up his masterpiece, hoping against hope that someone would buy a piece of it. Fat chance.
The Claudius Civilis would not just be the ruin of Rembrandt's comeback. It would also be the ruin of his greatest vision.
Or so I think. I can't be sure. None of us can, because we don't really know what the big picture looked like. What we're looking at here is a fragment, a fifth of the original size, the bit rescued from Rembrandt's knife.
All that we have left of the complete painting is the sketch Rembrandt made with prophetic irony on the back of an invitation to a funeral. But this precious scrap is enough to let us see the visionary grandeur of the painting's design, with its vast hall open to the trees, a barbarian king's lair. No wonder you think of the Last Supper when you see this picture, for Rembrandt has painted a secular altarpiece, mysterious, dangerous, joyously profane. No halo, but a bath of burning golden light. No candles, just the power surge of freedom. The fire of an idea. And you're thinking that it looks unfinished, aggressively rough, a work in progress. But Rembrandt's saying, in a voice that's a visual roar, that's you, a city, a country, a work in progress. This is my group portrait of all of you, a portrait of a people, a portrait of who you are, who you've always been.
Let the high and mighty celebrate their greatness with fastidious etiquette. Let them even copy the rest of Europe if they must. But Rembrandt, the bankrupt, the has-been, was their patriotic conscience. Smother yourself in fashion at your peril, he was saying. These are your flesh and blood, rough and honest, your barbarian ancestry. They made you Dutch, so banish your embarrassment, embrace them, honour them. For everything you think matters doesn't. The town hall with all its acres of marble can go tomorrow. Amsterdam can sink back into the sea again. As long as you have your rough freedom, you have all you need to stay Dutch.
So of course Rembrandt's not going to paint by the rule book. Instead, he does the roughest, toughest history painting ever, an old lion's roar of a picture. He had every incentive to paint it straight, but something in him just wouldn't do it. This is what drives the very greatest art, contempt for ingratiation.
Now Rembrandt had learnt this the hard way, when the callow hand of fashion had given him a resounding thumbs down, and when his relationship with the rich of Amsterdam had turned sour, and he'd been stripped not just of his fortune, but of his illusions. Giving them what they wanted was now beside the point. Giving them what they needed was more like it. But they refused to look, and that's why he cut up his masterpiece.
One of the very last pictures Rembrandt painted was Simeon the priest being brought the Christ child by the prophetess Anna, a story he'd done before in his youth. But then the painting had been sharp. Now it was dense and textured, almost as if it was woven, not painted. Out of the face of the Christ child pours a soft, brimming radiance, which falls on the face of the old man, who, with his eyes closed, understands at last he has, in fact, seen the light. Rembrandt's patrons, alas, did not. The painting was one of those found in Rembrandt's house when he died on October the 2nd, 1669. It's always been thought of as unfinished. Somewhere in that dim little house was another painting the world thought of as shockingly unfinished, a mutilated stump of a picture. This just may be the most heartbreaking fragment in the entire history of painting. And just because you can see, can't you, that it looks nothing whatsoever like an old master, that it leaps from the decorum of the gallery wall into some other world of eloquence. Rembrandt's Claudius Civilis tells us that the very greatest painting isn't bound by time or taste. A reminder, if ever we should need it, that eloquence doesn't always come with a pretty face.